Hi, you are actually with Fireside Chat by Debbie Marks. You see Debbie there in the background. Wave, Debbie, if you can hear us. We see you. There's Debbie in the background. She is away at a conference, and so I am actually going to be talking with Ruth today on behalf of Debbie. Debbie, you're going to want to put your your video back on. We see your badge. She's got it on mute, so she probably doesn't hear us. I don't know. I don't think I can stop hers. Let me look and see here real quick.
You might want to just stop recording and talk to her.
There we go. I got it. Okay. So anyway, we're going to talk today with Ruth. Now, Ruth, you have a 5-day challenge coming up soon, and I am so excited to hear about this challenge. Now, I had the opportunity to interview you, Ruth, on our Ohio Writers Guild a while back. And I got to learn all about your book and your publishing and how what made you decide you wanted to write a book and how you came up with your message. And so now, we've kind of been hanging out a little bit together. And now Ruth is moving forward. She has a 5-day challenge coming up, and she's going to be speaking on stage in South Florida on June 25. So I'm excited for that as well. So tell us, first of all, tell us the title of your 5-day challenge. Let's start with that. So what is the title?
The title is 5-Day Relationships on Fire Challenge. And that is really says it all.
I get that. Why are you so passionate about helping others with their relationships? Tell us about that.
I think it all started, we always like to help the people that are the former us. And I was stuck in my relationships. I was so passive. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I wanted to go. My relationships a lot of times were surface because we didn't know how to get deeper. We didn't know how to do that. My background has taught me a lot about relationships. And later in this discussion, I would like to tell you about my triggering moment, but we'll handle that probably in a little bit later. But I've been married for almost 50 years. And I've learned a lot about that marriage relationship because it is so important, but it can be so aggravating too. There's no perfect marriage, by the way.
Let me be the first to tell you, you do not look old enough to have been married for 50 years. Let me just say that. You look amazing. So I can appreciate that. Boy, I tell you, I remember those early days of learning how to maneuver relationships. I grew up out in the country, and we were, a family core. There were 4 of us. It was my mom and my dad and my brother and myself. Mm-hmm. And, I knew my place in that relationship growing up as a kid out in the countryside. And of course, I went to school and I had relationships. I had friends and teachers and all of that. But when I finally graduated from high school and got into my first kind of boy-girl relationship, where I had a boyfriend, boy, oh boy, the stories that I told myself that weren't true, he would say something or do something. And in my head, I'm thinking, he must be upset.
Right.
I told myself that story. Well, that if he's upset, it must be at me. Well, if it's at me, it must be something I did. Mm-hmm. If it's something I did, then it's something I need to change. And, it's just those stories that we tell ourselves. So when you talk about relationships, is that the kind of a relationship you're talking about? Is the marriage or the boyfriend, girlfriend type relationship?
That's part of it. And I do think that once you get where it's a significant other or a spouse, that should be your most intimate, your most deep relationship. But relationships are all over the place. You had a relationship with your parents, with your brother, and you probably still do. And you have relationships with friends. Mm-hmm. You have relationships with coworkers. My background also is I spent over 10 years as HR manager director. And I saw a lot of relationships there in that environment between supervisors, employees. Supervisors were consistently coming into my office and saying, now, how do I deal with this employee? And all of that type stuff. But you also have relationship with organizations.
Well, isn't that true? I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah. And it could be a formal organization, like where you're employed, because that's a big one. But it could be your church.
Right.
It could be even your kid's soccer team. That's an organization that you have relationship with. It may be a surface one, it may be a deep one, but you have relationships all over the place. And now the tips and tricks that I have learned through my life help in all relationships.
Well, that is good to know. So speaking of tips and tricks, what was your first aha moment that you had with your own relationship?
I mean, I struggled for many, many years. And when you were talking about families, I'm the middle child, by the way. So that added to a lot of my people pleasing and not really knowing where I fit in the family, except middle children just seem to know that they fit in the middle and they always give. But yes, this was probably 25 years ago. So I was an adult and I had given so much to different people that I'd lost myself. And a situation came up where a decision was made and I wasn't involved, and I kind of knew not to fight it because it hadn't worked in the past. So I was just hiding that pain. And I had a good friend that saw me that morning, and she had discerning eyes and she knew something was wrong, even though I thought I was doing a pretty good job hiding this. And she wouldn't say no for an answer. And after everybody else left the room, she kept asking me, Ruth, what's wrong? I didn't want to tell her because I expected the guilt trip. Everybody else gave me the guilt trip. And I just expected it from her. But I finally gave in. When trepidation, I actually said, this is what happened this morning. And she looked me in the eye, Kathy, and she said, that shouldn't be happening. And she didn't really say much more than that at the time, but my mind processed it. And when she gave me that message, it was like, Ruth, you are important. Do you know what? I had pushed myself down so much.
I got chills on just listening to your story just now, because I think that happens to all of us at some level, at some time in our lives when we're not heard, or we're not even given the opportunity to be heard.
Right. And especially if it's been pushed down several times. In fact, I want to give everybody that listens to this replay permission to be you, because that's really what my friend, her name is Martha, did for me. My mind processed it and it says, oh, I am important. And I give you permission to be you, is what she told me. That my desires, my dreams were important too.
Wow, that is powerful. That's just such a small statement, but it is so powerful.
And that brings me back to another thing with relationships, one we didn't talk about before, and it really is the most important one. It's the relationship you have with yourself. And do you love yourself? Have you forgiven yourself? We all have mistakes in our past. Some are big, some are small, it doesn't matter. But if we're holding that forgiveness against ourselves inside, it's going to keep us stuck.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's such a small statement, but it has such a huge impact once we can really wrap our minds around what that means. And I think that's the tough part is we hear it in our heads, you know, we hear you say it, but to then make that actually work for us in our hearts, I think it's a tough thing to learn how to do that, how to forgive ourselves. Yes. I think that's a tough one.
Well, in fact, I encourage the people when you listen to this, if you're now or later, that you take the time to look yourself in the mirror and say, I love myself. I forgive myself. And then as things come to your head, say, I forgive myself for this, whatever this is, because that's how you're going to get free.
Good advice. That again, that is so powerful. Now, you told me that you and your husband have been married for almost 50 years, but according to the US Census Bureau, only 5% of marriages last that long. How'd you guys do it, Ruth?
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, but yeah, no, it is. I mean, we come from a long legacy of marriages, strong marriages, and they weren't perfect. They were, none of them were perfect. So it does, like Tom's parents were married for 55 years before his dad passed. My mom and dad were married for 51 before my mom passed. And they had a period, I know, watching my parents, especially when the kids were teenagers, where they weren't all that close. But then they reconnected with each other after everybody left and enjoyed each other again. I can't
Okay.
speak for Tom's parents because I don't know that much about the ins and outs of them. So we have that in our background. And so it's there, and it's a deep commitment. Now, I do recognize that there's some marriages that you need to leave because they are toxic. I will say that from the get-go. And if that's the case, then get out.
And sometimes that's hard to discern because even if you have a toxic relationship, there are still some good parts to it. And so many of us, we keep hanging on to the good stuff and keep ignoring the bad stuff, thinking it's going to get better. So it's hard to make that decision. It's hard to discern that this is the time, or that this relationship is toxic and that the bad outweighs the good. It's just a hard decision. And I get that. And I'm sure you do too.
And I do think that most of the time you need to have somebody else as a sounding board, and maybe 2 or 3 people, and make sure it's somebody that's not totally biased one way or the other.
Right.
And one thing that I learned as far from reading, one of my mentors, he talked about, is there real hope that the situation is going to get better? But then, like you said, Kathy, is how big of an issue in the whole scheme of things is this one issue?
And if the relationship is totally toxic, I've discovered that it's generally not just one issue, it's more than one. But oftentimes, I think we're guilty of just trying to convince ourselves that it's going to get better when maybe deep down we know it isn't.
Right.
And it could be saving face, it could be financial, it could be what would I do if I ended the relationship financially. It could be, how am I gonna, where am I gonna live? It could come right down to the basics of food and shelter and clothing and so I get that. It's such a tough navigating all those relationship issues, good and bad, are so complicated sometimes.
Oh, they absolutely are. And you brought up a good point, because if we're too dependent on a relationship, then we're not even going to address the issues that need to be addressed. So, like, I was a stay-at-home mom when our kids were little. So, yes, I was totally dependent on my husband for financial.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, I mean, there was never any talk or even thoughts of leaving whatsoever. But even the minor things, you had a little bit of trepidation of bringing up if you thought it was going to hit a chord that he was going to, not be happy with.
I get it.
So, there's all those things. And so I encourage people that I work with to figure out what relationships you're too dependent on, and work toward independence first and then interdependence. And interdependence, by the way, is 2 people who know they can survive on their own, but they also know that life is better together. And
So then
so,
it's a choice to be together and they don't feel like they're stuck being together.
right,
Mhm.
right. And those are the relationships, those interdependent one. And you can tell my hands are put together because it is like that. And those are the relationships that are going to literally soar.
I get it. I get it. That again, that is such a powerful message. What are one or two marriage tips that you want to share with us?
Well, I kind of did as we went through there, but let's think about it. And I do think that marriage, the base of marriage, the foundation has to be commitment.
Okay.
Because if you don't have that piece, then we all have things that we get upset about. But if the commitment's not there, then the little things are going to trigger us and say, I'm out of here.
Yeah, over something kind of crazy, maybe
Right.
something real simple. Yeah, I can see that.
I burned the eggs. I'm out
Yeah.
of here. No.
Mark never wipes off the sink, doggone it.
Right. So,
But I realize in the scheme of things that that's just such a small part of what we do together as a couple. And so now I just
oh,
smile.
sure.
Now I just smile and go, ah, okay.
Well, and every relationship has that. Where
Yeah.
there's dirty socks on the floor, or this, that, and the other, how they squeeze the toothpaste. Those, and you have to list them out. And if somebody's struggling with this, I really would suggest doing the pros and cons of the relationship because of that. So commitment is definitely one, and then probably the second one we've circled around is decide if it's really important what you're getting frustrated with.
Right.
How deep is the issue? Um, and like I said, find a friend. You might want two or three because you can get different points of view. And I would suggest for the most part not go into your parents
Well,
because
that's a tough one because your parents are always going to be in your corner. And then when you
sure,
make up and smooth things out, they still feel like,
right,
you
right.
know, like he's not treating her right.
In fact, I would suggest going to somebody maybe that doesn't even have vested interest, like a professional, and have them help you work through what's going on there. So that's probably my two big marriage tips, but also love. But I'm going to go back to something else too. And that is the more you love yourself, not in a selfish way, but the more that you love yourself and the more you're healthy, the more healthy your love out to other people will be.
I found that to be true as well. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. And the more there's kind of a contentedness that kind of comes with that.
Sure.
And so the more I'm content with my world, then the more I can give to
Yeah.
others. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's my word for this year is to give. Mark keeps telling me, yeah, that's two words to give. But anyway, giving is my word. And so I just find that the more content I am, the easier it is for me to do that. And the easier it is for me to relate in all of those different relationships, whether it be with my girlfriend or with a business partner or, whatever it is that I'm in the middle of.
And
Um,
that's very true. And I'm going to take that a step further back from you with what you're saying there is because that contentment, it means that you are filled up.
True. Yes. Yes.
Because
Yes. I can see that.
we can't always be giving if we're not receiving. And your contentment is a symptom that you are filled up.
I can see that. Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I can see that. Now that you mentioned that, I do feel like I am fulfilled and content
Mhm,
and that I can continue to give.
mhm.
Now, I know that you were also the director of human resources for many years. One or two relationship truths did you learn during that time?
One of the first ones that I learned, and It's a really good one, and it will apply to any relationship. And that is that, and it comes from when we had people in the office, and this one was saying this, and this one was saying that. And I had my mentor tell me that to that person, like person one over here, their perception is true. This person over here, their perception is the truth. And usually the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Again, it's the stories we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of my mentors back then too was, well, it was a book. It wasn't a personal mentor, but Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I just devoured that book. And I think one of his habits, I can't tell you what number it is, but it's seek to understand, then be understood.
Right.
And what he says is let the other person talk until you can tell them what they're thinking, what they're believing, before you try to get your point of view in.
Yes. Understand first,
Right.
and be understood second.
Yes.
Yes. And again, like you, I can't tell you which habit number that was, but I do remember reading that as well.
It's 6 or 7. No, it's not 7. It's 5 or 6, probably.
But I'm so guilty, every time, I feel like, but that's not the way it is. Let me tell you the way it is. And so I have to check myself and just wait. Yeah.
And we think that if we don't get our point in first, nobody's going to hear us. And it takes a lot of maturity, personal maturity, to sit back and say, I'm very comfortable with who I am and what I believe, that yes, I'll let everybody else go first and saying what they want. Now, you can get yourself in trouble if that's the way you are just in life totally, because that's how I lost myself. And I did. I lost myself and had to go on a journey to find myself. So that's one of the tips that I learned during that time. And probably the other one was learning how to separate myself at times from what was going on. There's time to be present, and there's time to, well, I'm going to go this direction, because as an HR manager, there's times that you have to put on a mask. Now, in real life, I honestly believe that the more authentic we can be, the better. But there's also time, even in our personal relationships or professional relationships, that you do have to hold back. You don't let everybody see what's going on. And there's times that you've got to put on the mask and say, with this individual, the trust isn't there. So I'm not going to let them see all that's inside me.
I can see that. One of the things that I like to do when I'm in a conversation, especially if there is more than one person that's going to share, if there's just two of you, you probably won't get lost in the conversation if there's only two of you. But if there's 5 or 6 and everyone is giving their opinions and sharing, sometimes, they just never get around to you if you wait till you're last. And so I like to save a space for myself. I like to say, well, we're going to go around the room, and I want to hear everyone's ideas on this, or everyone's opinion about what happened or what's wrong or whatever the problem is. And then I'll share at the end. And right. I kind of say that out loud. And what it does is it holds that space for me.
That's really good, Kathy. That's really good in a group where you want to make sure that everybody, and I don't think in that situation, it would be bad to say, keep your shares to 2 minutes. And so they know, or whatever time, and then that way, when you do have to cut them off, they feel like they've had warning.
Right. But they all had a voice.
And I had a voice.
I think that's important. I learned a lot of those lessons when I was in the salon industry, and I'd have a salon full of stylists, and they would have a complaint about something. And I would say, all right, we're going to go around and we're going to talk about it. And then I'm going to share at the end, and we're going to come up with a solution. And so I would even plant that seed that the intent of this is to find a solution.
And that's good too.
Mhm.
But you know what I heard even before you got to that piece was the idea that I'm going to understand what you guys are saying, letting you have your voice first, and then I'll tell you at the end what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And so it's that seek to understand, then be understood.
But I found that that worked really well for me. And of course, then I'd have, you always have the personalities that, bulldoze their way through. And then you always have the ones that never say anything. And so you have to make space for them
Sure.
to say something because
Sure.
maybe they're introverts, maybe they're shy, maybe they're whatever. They just don't feel like they have a voice. Maybe they have a little confidence, but for whatever reason, they never participate. And so I think you have to kind of save a space for those folks.
Did you let them go first?
No, because I didn't, because oftentimes they didn't even know what they wanted to say.
Yeah.
And so I would let them go in the normal rotation wherever they were sitting in the room
Mhm.
because, and sometimes it was better if one or two people went ahead of them because
Yeah.
then they would go, oh, okay, that they would know a little more how to formulate their thoughts.
That's good too. That's good thinking. I'm
Because
sure
some of
you
them,
were a good leader.
if I started with them and I would say, what are your thoughts? They would go, oh.
Mhm.
And it would be hard to get, something out of them. So I get it. I get it. This relationship stuff it can be complicated. I understand
Oh,
that.
no.
Yeah. So we have heard it said that relationship an employee has with their direct supervisor has a direct correlation to job satisfaction. Now, do you agree with that? And what else have you noticed regarding work or business relationships?
I do agree with that. You know, there's some studies that show it's just important, if not more important than money. I think that depends on the situation because I do feel like all of us need a basic foundation of money to survive, and that comes first. But then when you get to the higher levels, then a lot of people will take a lower salary in order to work with somebody they really get along with.
Interesting.
You know,
Oh,
and because we do spend so much time at work, and our supervisor can either make or break us,
mhm.
because if it's a good relationship and they have faith in us and we have faith in them, then we're going to do awesome work. But if we feel like we're always being watched and they're just waiting for us to make the
Mhm.
next mistake, it's miserable. And yes, we will make more mistakes because we're being watched like that. So yeah, you had a comment before when I kind of cut you off, and I apologize.
No, no, no. I'm just thinking back over my work history and different supervisors that I've had. And I tell you that my favorite one was a gal named Cynthia. And she would always give everyone space to kind of do their thing. And then with a lot of respect, she would like bring them right back around. And I'll never forget this. Um, the owner of the company came in one time and he could not figure out how to use one of the machines, the copier, let's say. I don't even
Right.
remember what machine. Oh, I
Right.
think it was the postal meter. And
Oh, those are, yeah.
he was trying to use this postal meter and he got all upset and angry and was slamming it all around. And he was the owner.
Mm.
And he takes off, and he's all mad because he couldn't figure it out. And one of the underwriters, young guy, right, probably college age, and I was a little older, but not much. He wrote this paper of postal meter 101 and made it like really like press the red button, then and taped it over top of the postal meter. Well, our supervisor, the intermediate gal in between the boss and us, she came in and she laughed. She says, "Oh my gosh, that is the funniest thing I've ever seen." And we're all laughing, "Oh my God, he couldn't even use the postal meter and he owns the joint." And she laughed and we all laughed. And she said, "Okay, now our fun is over." And she said, "We've all had a good laugh." And she said, "I get it. You get it. We all get it." She says, "But this man signs our paychecks. He owns the company." And she said, "And we will have respect for him." So she said, "I'm going to ask you now to take the sign. Now that we've all had our fun, take the sign down." And I'll never forget that, because she didn't get mad. She didn't write anybody up. She did, she said, I get it. So she kind of related to what, now I wasn't in on doing the sign or whatever, but I remember thinking it was pretty funny, because this guy, he was so angry. He couldn't figure out that postal meter. And she said, we've all had our fun. Now let's take the sign down. And she said, and when he arrives, she said, we will show him respect. And I thought that was such a good way for her to handle that. Nobody felt like they had been, taken to task over anything. And everyone felt like she got it. But it just really impacted me, because I was probably 18 at the time. It just really impacted me on how she handled that.
You respected her and
Mhm.
how she didn't run away with it, but she let you guys have your moment.
Yes. Hmm.
And that brings up another thing. Respect is so key. So when you are having to address something, whether it be with a friend or with
Hmm.
anybody, show them respect.
Yes.
And I learned this too doing one of my hard jobs when I was HR director, because there's definitely times that you have to let employees go. And it's really a hard time for everybody. And like I tell my supervisors that were involved, I said, when this gets easy for you or me, it's time to quit. So if we get callous to taking somebody else's livelihood away, it's time for us
Right.
to quit. But I also realized, and these were, I mean, some of them were people that were good employees. We just didn't need the position anymore. And some of them was when the employee had done something that the company could not tolerate. So it was both. But if you treated them with respect, even though you were taking their livelihood away from them, it always went so much better, so much calmer. And so that's key in that situation, but also when you're addressing things literally with anybody, whether it's your spouse, your sibling, your friend, somebody at work, treat the person with respect. You address the issue, not the person.
Boy, that is a good point. That is such a good point. What are some other common mistakes that people make in their relationships?
Well, that definitely is one. And the other, well, there's lots more. I could probably give you 10, which I know we don't have. I don't even know, because more would come to my mind as I talk. But one of them is that we have problems when we address the symptom and don't get down to the root cause. Like somebody can be sarcastic, and typically that sarcastic remark is covering something up. Not all the time, but you have to do that, or you have to get below and say, what are they really wanting to say? Or are they really upset about this, but they're telling you in a passive aggressive way?
Yeah,
Or
because maybe they don't know how to handle conflict in the relationship. So
right.
that's their version of trying to deal with it.
So what about anger? We've had anger. We've been around people that have had anger. Is the anger really the issue, or is it hiding something deeper? Now, I do believe that anger should not be tolerated, don't get me wrong. But if you just say, quit being angry, we aren't really going to make change that way. We need to figure out what is the root that's causing this anger. And the anger may be global. With some people, it is. But I'm also saying that probably deep seated years ago, something had happened that caused an overall anger mentality. And yes, sometimes it takes professional help to get to the bottom of that. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can do it pretty quickly. But figure out what the real issue is. Is it a feeling that they're being pushed aside? Is it a feeling that they're not important? What is it? Do they feel like they've had unfair treatment? Get
Or
down to those root issues.
Or maybe just as simple that maybe they just feel like they're not being heard, that their voice
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of those things are important.
Wow. This has been such an enlightening conversation. Ruth, I adore you and everything about you. I love what you're doing with this 5-day challenge. But you also have written a book, Time to Fly, and it's called Breaking Free from Stuck and Behaviors Soaring Towards an All Around Healthier You. Is this book about relationships or something else?
I'd say both.
Okay. Okay.
Now, I wrote the book about 5 years ago or so, and it was my personal growth journey. I told you a little bit about when I had that aha moment, but there were so many mindsets and behaviors that were keeping me stuck. So it talks about 8 of those that I believe are keeping lots of people stuck. It's not just specific to me. It's things like not processing pain and letting it fester inside us.
Okay.
It's the things of where is your basic security based on? And we talked about that with your relationship to yourself and just all kinds of things like that. Looking at the root issue. And then the second part of the book is how you develop a growth environment, a safe growth environment. So is relationships, the word relationship throughout the book? Probably, but it's more of creating, knowing that our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical core all intertwine and work with each other. But that's relationships. That's relationships of those 4 things. But then it also brings in a lot of relationships in our physical world that we deal with. A lot of stories about, like we've talked about, that I've learned in my life from personal relationships and the professional ones. So yeah, it's both. I would, relationships isn't in the title, but it's still all about relationships because that is who I am. I love helping people develop their relationships.
Wow. We have covered several golden nuggets today. What would be your final tip that you would like to leave with us?
Oh, it's interesting. I didn't, let's see, let's think this through. I'm going to go back to I give you permission to be you.
I love that.
Love yourself, forgive yourself, find out everything you can about you.
I love that. So tell us, how can we connect with you? What is the best way to connect?
My email is ruth@ruthpierce.com. So it's just my name. I am on Facebook.
Okay.
I am on, it's Ruth Pierce Time to Fly Coaching. I am on Instagram. And if you put in Ruth Pierce on any of these, they'll come up. I am on LinkedIn, both a business page and a personal page on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So all of those are good.
And your book, Time to Fly, we can get that at Amazon?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'll put this up so you guys can see it. But if you put in Ruth Pierce Time to Fly, it should pop up. That's
Yes.
the easiest way to get that.
Yes. So connect with Ruth at ruthpierce.com. You can find her on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Time to Fly on Amazon by Ruth Pierce. Ruth, thank you so much for being with us today. I love it. You're rocking it, girl. I can't wait for this 5-day challenge. How can folks get into the 5-day challenge?
Can we post a link in the chat?
You can, absolutely. If you have it there, yeah. Yep, you can just click on the chat box right there and type it right in if you'd like. And what I will do when I actually upload the replay, I will put all of your links with the replay.
Okay, and even if people are watching this and it's after March or May 16th, come in anyway. Come in, like if you watch it on the 17th, come in, because even there'll be replays in the Facebook group. And then And then, you can continue with us. So don't feel
So
like
even
you
if they
have to-
can't make all 5, because it's a 5-day challenge and it starts
Yes.
on May 16th. So it goes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning. Is it
Right.
morning?
Afternoon. It's 2 o'clock
Afternoon.
Eastern.
Okay, 2
Eastern.
o'clock Eastern. And so even if they can't make all 5, you still want them to register and tap in there and then just listen to the replays on maybe the ones they didn't get to attend?
Sure.
Okay,
You're going to get more out of it if you can attend live. But yeah, the replays will be in the Facebook group, because we have a Facebook group that goes specifically for this challenge. And so you can do that. There is a
okay.
VIP option, and the replays are available ongoing. I think they'll go away out of the Facebook group after the week, but you can always sign up for that. And there's lots
Ah.
more in that VIP, and very much worth the value that it is.
Okay, so the 5-day challenge is free. And how much is that VIP, which gives them forever replays on the 5 days?
Right. I believe it's 97. It's in that
Okay,
vicinity.
okay,
Um,
perfect.
and
Good
then
to know.
and it includes an extra hour each day where we'll go even deeper in.
Good to know. Very nice. Very nice. Ruth, I can't wait. This is going to be amazing. You're amazing. You're rocking it, girlfriend. So I love everything about it. And with that, I think we're going to sign off. We are at the top of the hour already. Gosh, that hour went in a hurry.
It did. We've had a good time talking. It's been very
Yes.
good. And
So
I appreciate everyone that listens to this. Appreciate you, Kathy, and I appreciate everyone that listens to this.
thank you so much. And we will see everyone again next month with Fireside Chat with Debbie Marks. Thank you for joining in. Bye.